and I knew I needed to do something else. I knew my life was going in the wrong way. Like my values were going in one direction and who I was and how I was living was going in this direction. And your values don't come across and meet your life. You have to meet your values.
Just a little taster of what is coming up on the show. But first, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel. And also tell your friends and family about this podcast. Please let us know in the comments if you would like to hear any particular topic in relation to sleep or health. And I will create a show especially for you, just for asking the question. So let's get on with the show. Hello everybody, and you're welcome back to another amazing episode of the Empowering Family Health podcast. I have an incredible guest today, and we're going to be touching on a topic that can relate to everybody, especially the times that we're living in and the times that we're moving into as well. So I have Mark Carolan with me today. And before I bring Mark in, let me read you out his incredible bio. Mark is a life executive and wellbeing coach, and he is an NLP practitioner and a public speaker. And he is a survivor of the corporate world, that's a big statement, and now helps people to develop the skills to manage stress, manage their time, and begin to live the life that they want. He specialises in bringing people back home to themselves. And we're going to be talking all about that and how our life really truly makes sense once we learn to come home to ourselves. So Mark, come on in and say hello to everybody. You're very welcome.
Thanks a million, Joanne. It's great to be here.
Brilliant. Mark, I'm always curious about my guests, and I'm always intrigued by the work that my guests are doing in the world. And this is why I love speaking and having a conversation about that on the podcast. So, Mark, why are you doing this work? Give us a little bit of background leading into why you're so passionate about this area.
Oh, wow. This question could take the entire half hour, Joanne. Why am I doing this work? Well, I suppose for me, as you said in my bio, I'm a survivor of the corporate world or an escapee. I'm a bit like Red in Shawshank. I was so institutionalized, it was very hard to break out of that kind of institution. But for me, I had an opportunity to move into a new world. In terms of a role I was in was being made redundant. And either I could get another role in the company I was in, or I could do something that I needed to do. And I knew I needed to do something else. I knew my life was going in the wrong way. Like my values were going in one direction and who I was and how I was living was going in this direction. And your values don't come across and meet your life. You have to meet your values. So I was like, if you keep going that way, I was heading for serious trouble. And I knew I loved people. I know I loved encouraging, helping people. I know I loved driving people on because I was always doing it in the coaching world. I'd always be coaching people and trying to help people. And I knew this is a space I wanted to be in. And so coaching made sense for me at the time. And I just jumped straight into it. As I was still working, I got all these coaching qualifications and I just jumped straight into coaching. And what's interesting is a lot of people I spoke to, when I told them what I was doing, and I should say, when I was brave enough to tell them what I was doing, because it took me time to admit it, to put my hand up and say, this is what I do now. When I got over the impostor syndrome, a lot of people said to me, that is perfect for you. I can't believe you're doing that. That is the perfect thing for you to do. And so for me, I love it. I love the space. I find it is a pleasure to be coaching people, to be working in that space, but it is a privilege. It's a privilege to hear people tell their honest truth and to be in that space, because in life, so much of our communication is superficial. We meet people and it's just, we're grand, we're fine. There's nothing really going on. And we never really get down to the true person.
Pretending, yeah.
Unbelievable. When you get into this space, you only get the magic because when you get to the true person and you're helping that person see themselves how they are. And in every person I work with, I learn something. Every single time they say something, they're always saying something that I'm sitting there going, oh my God, that's for me. I'm writing a little note on this side of the page, but that's something I need to think about and work on now myself. Because when you encounter truth, you can only learn from it. You can only learn from that experience.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my God, there was so much in that, Mark. And what I heard was you really got to see something that people need, that they need, right? Because you could see that they were living a life of pretending, and the surface level stuff, the masks, you know, that you're talking about. And people really aren't themselves when they're living from that space. So let's get into why are people, what's going on in people's lives that they have to pretend that that they're avoiding who they really are. I know that's a big loaded question, but what's going on for people that they can't see that this is the lives that they're surviving. People are surviving.
Yeah.
You know, so what is it that's going on? What's causing people to live this type of life?
Yeah, look, I think it's a huge question, Joanne. It's a huge question. Like and I think the origin of that question starts when we're very young.
Yes.
I think it starts because the very first moment you go to school, what are you trying to do? You try and fit in.
Yeah.
And then you go to the next school and you try and fit in again. And then you go on to university, you start working, you're trying to fit in. And you're meeting people and you're fitting in all the time. And every time you fit in, you lose a little part of yourself in the fitting in. If you're accepted as you are, that's not fitting in. That's being who you are. But we're always trying to not rock the boat. We always don't want the judgment. We don't want the criticism. We don't want to be different. It's very hard to be different in society. I think a part of that is our fitting in. But also it's because I think vulnerability is a huge part of it too. Like when we're young, you know, we can be vulnerable. But what I mean by that is we put ourselves out into the world and we are ready to be hurt and we get hurt. And when we get hurt, we pull back and we build the walls and we build the blocks and we build the belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, that I'm not smart enough. We do all this and we hold ourselves behind these walls and keep ourselves safe behind that wall.
Protect ourselves.
But we're a stranger to who we really are because superficially we're living out in front of ourselves, but really the truth of us is really back in here. Our authentic self is the one we keep locked away all the time. And I think it keeps going because then we develop the habit of running away, or we develop the habit of appeasing or pleasing or being a people pleaser or being a perfectionist, or we develop a habit of being aggressive and fighting with anyone about everything. And all of these things are simply ways to cope with what's going on in the world, but they're not being authentic. They're just ways to hide from shame and cover up from shame and not deal with shame and move away from that sense of being vulnerable.
I love it. And I love what you said about fitting in, and I can really totally relate to that. And I can see it in so many ways. And like you bring it right back to the child fitting in, and we talk about peer pressure. That's a real typical example. Peer pressure, kids in school, and they want to fit in because they need a sense of belonging, and kids need to feel like they belong. And that you talked about pleasing people as well, and kids do that, especially see it in the home environment. Kids do that. They want to please their parents, right? And if they see that their parents are upset and annoyed or whatever, the children a lot of the time think it's because of them, so they do something to please the parents and fit back in again, you know. And we see this all the time, and this, you know, kids grow up learning these habits. You spoke about habits. Kids grow up learning these habits, and then it becomes automatic and becomes so embedded and ingrained in us that we can't even distinguish that this is it's a maladaptive habit, if you like.
It's a coping mechanism. We build all these coping mechanisms for everything. Look, habits are a critical way to survive in life. You know,
and sometimes they serve us.
They serve us completely. How would you drive a car if you didn't have a habit of driving a car? Because the first time you get into a car, my God, 3 pedals, a steering wheel, side mirrors, rear view mirror, traffic, cyclists, buses, whatever else is going on. That's
I remember.
That's an insane amount of information to process every single second. But now you don't even think about it. In fact, you're so good at driving, you can hold a phone in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other.
Oh God, yeah.
But I've
seen it.
Habits gone to extremes. But so coping is really good. But unfortunately, so a habit is anything that will help you solve a problem. So habit is a way to cope with a situation. But unfortunately, if what we use to help us solves the problem, but it's not good for us, it doesn't matter. We repeat it. And we repeat it and repeat it and repeat it until it becomes a part of who we are and a part of ourselves. Yeah. And that's an awful lot of it. That's why we build this up, because we built up these coping mechanisms that have become problematic. And it's very hard to tear that down. It's very hard to raise the awareness to see, well, why did I do that? Or why did I cope in that situation? I think a perfect example, and a simple one, is in any relationship, we would have a tendency to react the same way all the time to similar situations, like be angry about stuff. Or let's use my entire gender for a moment as an example. You know, we're terrible at apologizing or admitting we're wrong, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and what is that? Is that because we can't be vulnerable? We won't admit we're wrong, even if we are wrong? Why do we aggressive? Why are we fighting against it? What's the value to that?
We don't like to be wrong. Yeah.
But that's our coping mechanism with not liking to be wrong, with the shame of being wrong.
Yeah.
So therefore we fight against it. But like it's a nonsense, and it's just a perpetuating cycle of an unnecessary row.
It's a fear of not being accepted, is it? Like people won't accept us if we're wrong about something.
Yeah, well, there's a shame cycle in being wrong. No one wants to be wrong or thought of as wrong because you're not good enough and you're judged. We don't want that. We want to avoid that at all costs. To open yourself up to potentially being wrong is being vulnerable, and that's a space we're scared of.
Yes, it is. It is, and kids are very good at it when they're young, but that's shut down in them. That's a big problem, and this is why. You know, and look, I talk a lot to parents about sleep and, you know, how we're living the lifestyle. I believe it's the lifestyle we're living that's preventing us from sleeping well at nighttime.
Yeah.
And, you know, it all starts in the family environment, because this is where we've grown up and this is where we're familiar with and all the rest. And I speak to parents and I talk to them about, you know, parenting is one of the hardest jobs in the world, and it doesn't come with a manual, and we don't always get it right. Okay, we do the best that we can, but think about it, we make our children wrong on so many levels. Oh, don't do this, don't do that, that's not right, and we mean well by it, but what message is that given to our child? I'm not good enough. You know, when you really think about it and strip it all back down, and then the children are growing up being conditioned this way, and then it goes into the child pleasing people then so that they're accepted, they're loved, they're not judged. That you talked about, the judgment, that's a huge part, isn't it?
Yeah, massive. There's two things, or two stories I'm reminded of. I was given a talk actually on coming home to yourself recently, and one of the ladies in the room, she asked a question after it. She said, but what if you're a people pleaser? What do? You know, how do I not be a people pleaser? You know, everyone expects me to say yes all the time. And to tell her to say no was too simplistic. She's like, I can't say no. I've been saying yes for 45 years of my life. I can't turn around and say no.
Yeah.
And I said, well, then say, can I think about it? Can you leave it with me? Let me have a think about that. If I do that, I can't do that. And it's like, it's just people putting themselves on you, and you've already created, because again, it's as much as say it's coping mechanisms, you've developed a role that you play. You play this role.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And you adapt that role. And she was adapting the role, and she had to just slowly break herself out of the role in order to be her authentic self. But I think when you say about a parenting as well, because we adapt the role of a parent.
Yeah.
We adapt this role, and I should be this and I should do that. And like, I should give out in this situation because something's not been done right. And years ago, look, I wish I could do this all the time, because I'm like every other parent. I end up going, what are you doing? And, you know, losing the head because we're under pressure ourselves. That's why we lose the head. But one day, the daughter took the milk out of the fridge and she dropped it. And so the initial reaction is always, what are you doing? Oh, look at the mess. But then just in that moment, the thought came into my head, no use crying over spilt milk. So I actually went, oh my God, look at the way it's flowing across the floor. It's not mad. It's like a milk river. And she's looked at me with that fear ready to be given out to. And then she stopped and she could relax. And she go, okay, it did, you know, but it's just a different approach to the same situation. You can't put the milk back in the carton, and roaring at the person is never going to change the difference. But we adopt the role as a parent in order to give out because you did something wrong. And therefore, the next time you take the milk, you can only see the shake in the hand because you're afraid of being shouted at because you're going to drop the thing.
Yeah. And now when that happens, when you shout at the child for the spilled milk, now they're learning through fear. When we do that, I think we're all guilty of doing that at some point in our lives, right? So we can't be beating ourselves up either. But I really get what you're saying, and I love how you did that. Like, oh, look, the milk flowing, and you were able to observe that and notice that in the moment, which was great. And I think that takes practice to do that, but it is very doable. I think it comes with a lot of awareness, observing, you know, just noticing things, being aware of how we're being. And like what you said about the different roles, and I call them archetypes, and you know, we can call them what was the other one I heard, there was another word for it, no, I can't remember, but there was like the leader, the warrior, the victim, the mammy, all these different roles. And I had my event last week and I brought my daughter to my event. Now, I was a mammy up to that point, but when I was in doing my talking, I was a leader, you know, I had the leader hat on, you know, and the teacher hat on, as opposed to the mommy hat. So we can be different roles. And I think it's really important that we can distinguish what role we're playing at that time, but we don't always have to be the mommy or the parent, because that's exhausting.
Do you know, it's interesting that this has come up, because again, I have two examples of that are perfect. A lady actually raised it in the talk I did the previous day at that event last weekend, and she actually broke down in tears, and she was talking about how she'd hurt herself. She was in her 70s and she was hurt herself, and her kids would like ring her and say, I'm coming over for dinner, you know, and she'd be like, can you just not, please? And they'd still come over anyway, and the onus would be on her to feed them and all this, and you know, and to make the dinner and everything. And she was getting really emotional. It's like, I need them, I need a break from them, I need a break from them. And another lady I was coaching, and she was 67 years old, Joanne, and I love telling this story because of the example it shows in what our lives can really be. She was trying to get out of work. She was working in a family business. She was moving down to 2 days a week. And anytime she took a day off, her daughters or son would ring her and say, would you mind the kids? And she said, I love my grandchildren, but sometimes I'm just sick of them. I want my own time. Like, I want to stop being a mammy, because all I am is a mammy, but I'm not. I'm now 67 years old. Where is my time for my life? When do I start living who I want to be?
Love it.
And it was a great conversation. And we worked through a lot of stuff with her. And it was very obvious that maybe her marriage wasn't that happy. And she was always confined to this role, even working in a family business, kind of being a mammy within that as well. And she told me at the end, as we finished working, she said, I'm going to do something that demonstrates my new sense of freedom. And I said, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. What are you going to do? She goes, well, I'm after getting a role in a play. And I thought, that's fantastic. She goes, no, but that's not it. And then about 3 days later, I got a text from her, and it was a video of a photo message. She goes, I just got this tattoo. And it was a tattoo the whole way up the inside of her arm. Not something small, this huge symbol up the inside of her arm. And she says, this means freedom to me. And I go, that is fantastic.
I get that.
Every time she looks down at her arm, she said, I'm free to choose what I'm going to do in this.
Oh, I get that.
I'm free to choose.
You know what I heard in that as well, Mark, right? Which was when she said, I love minding my grandkids, but sometimes I don't want to be the mammy. Yeah. So she understood, and she was in touch with what her values were. You were talking about values earlier on, and I think that's a really important part of, like you mentioned, that you talked about how important values are of what it is that makes you whole and complete. And she got to see that, and she knew what that was. And I think that is just priceless, to know that what it is that I just don't want to mind the kids, because I just don't want to be a mammy all the time.
100% a mammy. Like, look, our Irish culture is so matriarchal in particular, and also quite patriarchal, that we're so refined and rigid within these structures. And even like the kids and adult children of parents will be questioning them, why are you doing that? As in, you can't live a life as a parent because you're a mommy or a daddy. Yeah, exactly. We'd like our own children to give us that freedom, but we won't give that freedom on, you know, because we're so role built in our society. We're so structured within that. It's strange how we do that.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I can just see that on so many levels. Talk to us about, when you talked about habits and all this, are we adapting more addictive type, and I know addictive is a very heavy area, but we can be addictive in other areas that are not substance abuse.
100%.
Yeah.
I've been working, I know we were talking about it before, I've been working in addiction treatment center of late, giving talks, and I've been learning a lot from talking to the people who are there, the people who are working in it and the people who are volunteering in it, about addiction and how it's affecting in our modern world. And look, 20 years ago, everyone who reported there was generally a male in his 50s with an alcohol addiction, and a few females in their 50s with alcohol addictions. Now it is alcohol, drugs, gambling, and in the adolescent center, it is gaming, it is phones. And I think like this particular device here is habits are formed, right, by cue, craving, response, reward. There's a cue and a craving and a response and reward. The cue is your phone buzzes. The craving is to see the message. The response is you pick it up. The reward is you get to see the message. Your phone is built to create a habit in you because it's always removing boredom. So there's no wonder it creates habits and we get addicted to the phone as a behavior, because it's designed to do that. You'd nearly swear the mobile phone companies knew what they were at.
Oh, of course they did. Yeah, of course they did. And I love how you described that. That is so, it's a dopamine hit, like, isn't it?
Completely. Every time, the craving and the response. I get to see the message, I get the message. And then you got your apps online, like TikTok is pure dopamine. It changes every 30 seconds. You are never lost. You can never be bored because there's always something new and always something new. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to conquer boredom and create dopamine. And unless we're aware of what it's doing to us, we're in real trouble. I know I'm terrible. I'll be sitting there and the kids, and we got the phone. Now the phones are banned at the kitchen table. If we're eating, no phones are allowed. Has to be banned, because otherwise we're on our phones. And then what example are we giving the kids that your phone is allowed at the kitchen table? if we're here, we're communicating.
Yeah.
And we have to start that.
Yeah, I love, God Almighty, I love that. And like, we could talk for an hour about mobile phones and laptops and gaming and everything else, because I have a pet hate. They're great. Technology is great. Technology is advancing very, very fast. But I think we need to be really responsible and be aware of what's going on. And there are biological effects, as you know, with all these responses that we're having, the dopamine, the pathway that you talked about. And interestingly, I watched a video by Simon Sinek, and he said gambling, smoking and addiction, right? Gambling, smoking and addiction, they all have the same neural pathway, this dopamine pathway, right? Now, when you bring phones in and gaming and all that, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
With all this smoking, gambling, all this, there's an age restriction on it. Yeah, in most countries, 21. There's no age restrictions on phones when it comes to kids. I see kids. My daughter is 12 now in November, and every single child in her classroom, except for her, has a phone. They bring a phone into school. I think that is just way too young. And parents would say, oh, but they need to text when they're out of school and all this. Look, there may be, you know, at times, but not every single day. They all have their Wi-Fi on their phones, I'm sure, when they go into school. The Wi-Fi is another story as well, because that is a toxin in our environment. But we're not given the right message. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about mobile phones and usage. They're great to a certain point, but we need to understand how to use them properly and at the right time, because a lot of people are using them at bedtime as well and preventing them from sleeping. And again, the dopamine is an excitatory neuron that's keeping us awake at nighttime. So it's a huge area, Mark, isn't it?
I think our challenge for us, Joanne, is because we grew up in a world before phones. So we understood and we remember a world before phones. So we have a sense that there is a world outside of it. And we know it is. We know there's a world outside of it where phones become a tool. Yeah. But the generation that our kids are, they do not know anything but technology. They grew up as babies. We handed them technology for them to mess around and play with. So that is their world. So we can't take them away from technology, but we need to educate them to technology.
Absolutely.
Saw something brilliant recently, was talking about, like, especially like if you look at TikTok and Instagram, they're very insidious for young girls in particular, and for young boys too, because of the life they portray, the over-sexualization, you know, that they have access to at a young age. And how do you protect them from this imagery straight away? And I think you have to build the self-confidence of the individual child. They have to become sensible enough in who they are and confident enough in who they are, so that this imagery and stuff that they're being subjected to does not affect who they are intrinsically. And I think that's our challenge as a parent.
This is the foundation, isn't it, of who they are? When you talk about coming home to themselves, this is the foundation. Know who you are and what your values are, and the self-confidence and all of that is really, really important, because then they won't be influenced so easily by all these. And I do see teenagers, you know, doing the selfies and putting all the filters on.
Of course.
You know, the perfect image, like, you know, and then the comparison. Oh God, we could talk an hour about this. The comparisons that go on and all these Snapchat and all these things, you know, and all the kids think that kid is perfect and they have a brilliant life, and you know, and then they start comparing themselves and they say, oh, I have a shitty life compared to that person, and all this comparison then, and then we see more suicides, and it's all related to this.
Yeah. Comparison is such a dangerous thing, because that's outside of ourselves. Like, I think for comparison, if you're going to compare yourself to anyone, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. That's your comparison subject. Because if you're better than you were yesterday, well, then you're winning, and that's your best comparison. Like, I know we can use comparison if someone's doing something that you admire and you want to achieve and you want to gain from, and you're going, do you know what, they're on that level, I want to get up to them, and you're comparing yourself with them in terms of trying to build yourself a path. That can be good, as long as your outcome isn't their outcome, because they can't be the same thing. Yeah. But otherwise, the comparison with yourself is the best comparison, because that's who we're competing with in essence.
Yeah, absolutely. I really hear that. So, and again, coming back to what matters to you, where your passion is, what you want to achieve in your life, and it's all individual. So we can be inspired by these people, and we can learn a lot from these people who have succeeded in life, you know. And success is a whole other topic in and of itself. It's not all about making money, you know, and it's that fulfillment in any given moment. Like, you know, it's that fulfillment, and it's an ongoing journey. It's not like you reach a destination, you achieve something, because life still continues after that. So it's moment by moment, it's an onward journey, you know. It's all of that, and how we can use the tools, but always connecting back to ourselves and asking ourselves, is this what I really want?
Yeah, I think like that's such a good point. It is a journey, and it's always a journey, and we forget that. We think there's a destination, and there is a final destination in this existence, no doubt about it. But
Yeah,
we
we're
forget
all
that
going to die.
it's a journey until we get to that final destination, and there is no stopping point.
Yeah.
It's like I've been really thinking about this lately because of this sense of purpose that people feel, and like I use an example. I think it was Joe Brawley's an awkward character to talk about, but I think it was him was talking about the moment Derry won the All Ireland, and he trained for 20 years, started playing at the age of 8 years old to finally get to this point. And when the final whistle went, he was like, "Why don't I feel happy now? Because I thought this was the whole purpose.
Yeah.
And once I do this, I'll feel happy." Because we put all this sense into the destination of the purpose, and that's where we lose out, because it's not about that. It's about the journey to there. And when we were talking about values, I think that's one of the key factors, because we all look for this purpose in life, and we look externally for this purpose because we see other people with these great ways of doing things, and we think that's I have to find my purpose. But you won't find your purpose externally.
Yeah.
You find your purpose by finding your values. What are your values? Once you find them, then you'll find your purpose naturally, because it'll be in line with your values. That's your journey to your purpose. And that's the space we need to look at.
Yeah. And something that I always do in my coaching, Mark, I don't know if you do the same. Like a lot of people that I say, what is it that matters to you? What do you want in your life? And most people can't actually answer that question, right? And so I go back to, well, what did you do well when you were a child? Or what did you find yourself doing the most without, that you spontaneously did? Because children do that. They'll spontaneously spend most time doing what it is that they enjoy doing or what they love. And for me, I was always, I loved music, but I was always kind of creative, I wasn't a doll person or anything like that. I didn't do dolls, but I was always minding people and looking after people. And I got satisfaction out of that, as a child. I was always a carer and a protector as a child, and that's who I am today. Like, and I really love that. And I just fall into that. And that's who I am, and I really value that, because you see, my idea is, if the people around me are happy and content being the optimal word, content, then, they've no need to be defensive or have to be a certain way. There's no competition, right? They can just be, and it's a more harmonious world. And if the other person is being that way, it just reflects back to me and vice versa. And then before you know where you are, there's a ripple effect. And that's how the world can be, when we're all doing our little bit. And, but it all starts with what is important to us and what, for us to fill us up, to create that sense of fulfillment. So I want to ask you the multi-million-dollar question, Mark. What advice, or how can people come home to themselves? How do people do that? Where do they start, Mark?
Start with connection, because we are human animals. And as a human animal, we need connection. We need connection to people around us. We need connection to our community. If we have a connection, if you're lucky enough to have someone in your life that will hold you in a space that allows you to make mistakes, allows you to apologize, and allows you to grow within that, well, then you are blessed. And that's very lucky. But if you don't have that, there's another connection that's way more important in any case, and that's the connection to yourself. Yeah. And that starts with self-compassion. If we don't have any self-compassion, we cannot grow. We cannot change, because that allows ourselves the space, and it allows ourselves to say something to ourselves that's so important, Joanna. It allows ourselves to say to ourselves, you know what? I'm enough.
Yeah.
I am enough. Because we look at everything as a scarcity. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. And we look to be plenty, but I am enough is enough. And once we develop the ability of self-compassion, then we begin to understand who we are. And then we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable as an adult again, and come back into the world that we left for so long ago, and allow ourselves to make mistakes, because we can forgive those mistakes now, because it's okay, because we're making the right mistakes in the right way. And the judgment doesn't matter much anymore, because now it's about ourselves. We're not being judged because of shame. We're being judged because people don't understand that this is who we really are. And it's their problem, not ours, because we have our self-compassion for ourselves. And that's our starting point. That's our starting point to grow from.
We're our own worst critics, Mark, aren't we?
When anyone, if somebody falls over, you'll go over to them, you pick them up. You'll say, you're all right, keep going. You fall over, you'll tell yourself you're an idiot.
We don't. You wouldn't talk to your best friend the way we talk to ourselves.
Not at all. But that's the beginning of self-compassion. Ask yourself, I like to ask two questions. And it's a great way for people to start down a self-compassion journey. First of all is, how are you? And how are you is such a big question, it's hard to answer. But we break it down. How are you mentally? How are you physically? How are you emotionally? How are you spiritually? How are you in all these domains of your life?
Love it.
And then where are you? Like, where are you right now? Where are you going? Because wherever you're going, that's where you're going to end up. And if you don't know where you're going, well, you're still going to end up in that same space. So if you can answer where you are, then you can go and say, you know what, I don't want to get there. I want to go somewhere else. And then you can start to do that. But where you are is also a good question, because it'll tell you, are you at home or are you living externally to yourself? Is all of your life external requirements and external satisfaction, or is what's going on inside that you're actually living to? And there's where we start with our self-compassion too.
Oh, that's so much great advice, Mark. And it really is so important, to ask ourselves these powerful questions. We don't ask ourselves these questions on a deep level. I love the way you said, but how are you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even, what is it you want to achieve in your life, fulfillment, where, why are you waking up in the mornings type of thing, like what is it you want to do in the world? And it doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be like, saving a country or anything like that, it can be something small, but something that's giving you that sense of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you said, Mark, was, and I can really see this in the family situation, is about, children feeling seen. And when we talk about love, right, what is love? And we all say we love our children, but I sometimes say, well, do we really understand what love is? Because love is seeing the child for who they are without judgment, without making them wrong. Like really loving them unconditionally. And I think that is key to feeling part of, to feeling belonged in a family. And as you say, that really creates the space to allow a child to be vulnerable, to really show up with who they are. If they're making a mistake, they're not afraid, because we can learn and grow through our mistakes. And I think what you just said is absolutely priceless, Mark.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah,
really, really is.
You hit something very true with the parenting. I think in our modern world, we want to be loved by our kids. We want to be their friend, but we're not supposed to be their friend. And that's very hard. And we have to love them unconditionally, but we also have to guide and cajole and encourage and help and big them up, but also ask them the tough questions of themselves so they become these more rounded individuals. And they don't spend. I saw this quote the other day, that old age is great because you get to be who you really are. I thought, like, why are we waiting?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't want to keep our kids wrapped up in cotton wool, keeping them safe. Unfortunately, well, you can say unfortunately, we have to let them learn, because it's through these events, these mishaps, whatever, that they grow and learn physically, mentally, emotionally. And as long as we keep them wrapped up in cotton wool and fight their battles for them, they're never learning. And then when they become adults, they're screwed when they can't fend for themselves. They can't,
Well, it's like we talk about resilience and the importance of resilience. And like, resilience goes in so many ways. Your resilience is your ability to keep going, to get up and go again.
Yeah.
But also, when I was talking about vulnerability is your resilience to shame. That's what it is.
Yes, it is.
If you're resilient to shame, you can
that.
be vulnerable and you can grow and move. But if you're not resilient to shame, if you're worried about shame and afraid of it, afraid of being judged, you'll build that armor, you'll build those walls, and then you can't move forward from that.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, vulnerability is being afraid of who you really are, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that. Mark, we could talk for so long, and we're coming to the end of the podcast. Mark, tell us a little bit about how people can find you. Your web addresses and all that are behind you there, but just shout it out there just so people can hear you. If anyone's
so you can find me at markcarolancoaching.com or Mark Carolan Coaching on Facebook or LinkedIn, also on Instagram and TikTok, but I need to do more on those, and I do enjoy doing those. I don't do enough. There's enough social media in the world.
And what kind of services do you do, Mark? How can people work with you?
So I suppose, look, I've been a survivor of the corporate world. My intention in the corporate world was to change it, and now I'm going back in to change it. So I do work with companies and try and work with staff, both professionally and personally, because I'm an executive coach as well. But an awful lot of change is about personal change. But for people listening, like, this idea of bringing them back home to themselves, I help people really find out who they are and find out what they need in this life, and create the plan to make that happen, create the plan to move forward with that, to make sure that the life that they're living is the one that they actually want. Or a lady said to me recently after I was working with her, she said, you didn't help me get the life I want. You helped me get the life that I need. I think that's more important, because the wants and the ideals, but let's get what we need first, because if we don't have that, then we're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah. I love what you said about the wants, because, you know, people, they want certain things and they think that will help them fulfill in an area or whatever, but actually underneath it all, we all have needs that we need to fulfill on. And Mark, I love everything that you're doing. I think it's incredible, because you know, you're creating a place for people to really find out who they truly are. You're creating that space for them, asking these powerful questions, because I really believe that the world that we're living in at the moment there's way too much chaos and friction and fighting and war and all this stuff. But when we can come home to ourselves, be content, have peace of mind, sleep well at nighttime, then there's no competition, there's no defensiveness. We can help each other more effectively, because we always have challenges in our life. So we can all be in a better place to help each other, because at the end of the day, thousands of years ago, when we were living in tribes, we all raised the little child in the village, didn't we? We all did. We all helped. And that's what we want to get back to, community. And community is really, really important for our survival, for us to thrive in life on a personal level, and then also in the family and the whole community. So Mark, listen, have a great day. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for all your wisdom. I just think what you've talked about in this episode with me today is just absolutely priceless. And I really hope that somebody will get they will get something from this conversation, because it's been truly invaluable. So you may have saved somebody's life today, Mark, in this conversation. So listen, thank you so much, Mark, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Joanne. That was lovely. Great to be here. Thank you so much. Okay.
I do hope you are enjoying these conversations, and to help me continue pushing these videos and audio podcasts together, I do have an ask. I do need support to help me to keep bringing you knowledge and insights. There is a Patreon link, patreon.com/empowering family health, or you can make a donation via PayPal. All the links are in the description and the pinned comment. You can do a one-off, or you can do a monthly support. So I'd really appreciate that. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Take care.